periodically, sometimes more frequently than others, sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a year, and try to do it generally around when there's something interesting happening. And so this is a kind of a two-part series that went along with a new feature development in Phoenix, which we'll tell you more about, but is BuildUp's open source social media analysis tool that we offer to peacebuilding organizations, in which lots of peacebuilding organizations are using. And this new feature development was that you could plug in to open source classifiers, which also creates questions around how one would build their own open source classifier. And so while the part one of the webinar was about these new features, which included kind of basics around what is a text classifier and why you would use it, and that recording is available. I'll post it in the chat in a minute. This webinar is looking at really digging into how one builds a webinar, and really specifically, sorry, not build a webinar, sorry, how one builds a classifier, and really specifically, the annotators that one needs to do it, how you train models. So that's what we're talking about today, is this annotation process. And we have great panelists here today because all of us have been annotators. And so this is really digging into the annotation experience. So just to introduce myself, I'm Julie Hawk. I'm the Peacebuilding and Research Lead at BuildUp. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Notre Dame, at the Kroc Institute for Peace Studies. And last year I was involved in training a model and doing annotation for looking at polarization within Christian communities here in the US, political polarization. And this year I've been doing interviews with annotators from other peacebuilding, from these various peacebuilding initiatives from other organizations to see what the experiences of annotators are. So that's my kind of plug into the topic. And we'll let the other panelists introduce themselves as well. Hussam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So good evening, everyone. I think we'll go good afternoon based on where you are. So my name is Sam Fatah. I am co-leading Sudan program within BuildUp. I've been working with BuildUp for a year now, and I am also leading the ECFB project, which is the automatic classifier for bees in Sudan. Okay, this is why I'm here with you today to reflect what we have been doing in Sudan. So I'm very happy to be with you, and I'm wishing that um, this webinar going to be as fun as we can. And thank you.
Great. Viola, do you want the next?
So hi everyone. My name is Vala. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a software engineer at an organization called Kala, and I've been working with Build Up this year as part of their AI piece, as part of their peace classifiers in the Kenyan team. Yes, nice to be here.
Great. Great job.
Um, Hello. Sorry. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Rachel Orpengs. Currently, the coordinator for FICOMA, that is the Coalition for Content Moderation and Freedom of Expression here in Kenya, and have been working with the Build-Up team. Just doing classification for the content here in Kenya for the model. Thank you.
Awesome. We'd love if folks here could also introduce yourselves in the chat, and specifically who has used or done annotation. Like, what's your annotation experience? Have you done it before? Have you needed it before? Have others done it on your behalf? So maybe put who you are and where you're affiliated or where you're coming from, and your annotation connections. All right, while chatting starts to happen, we'll get kicked in. So we're going to talk roughly around what is annotation, but then also share experiences from the various contexts that we're annotating within. So I think I'm kicking it over to you, Hussam. Oh, I already talked about Phoenix. This is Phoenix. If you don't know about it, this is the open source social media tool. And there's a QR code, and you can visit, and you can apply, and you can use it for free. Okay, there we go. Now over to you, Hussam. Oh, are you there? Yeah.
I would just want to flag that I think the chat is locked or something because someone
Oh, is
just,
it?
yeah, I think it's disabled. So
Oh,
please, can just,
okay. I'll work on that.
yeah, please.
Oh,
So,
I can fix it. Yep, I got it. Sorry.
yeah,
Thank you. Thanks,
yeah,
Hussam.
it's fine, it's fine. Um, okay, I'm gonna start with talking about what is annotation. Um, so for those who don't know, it's quite simply annotation is the act of add meaning to data. It is when you take something raw, like social media post, and label it with context, like this is a hate speech one, this is a polarizing content. So through annotation, we help computer to learn um, from human understanding. I think you should, yeah, you should go to slide, yeah, the next one. Okay, so why it matters? Uh, because in fact, annotation transforms chaos into clarity, and without it, machines can't make sense of the complex emotional and often messy ways we communicate as humans. So, so this is a very important thing. And the other thing is that in peace building, annotation takes a much greater role because it is not just about efficiency, it's about safety, it's about justice. And by when you label something as a hate speech or divisive rhetoric or constructive dialogue, you train artificial intelligence to recognize and respond to harmful content before it spreads, hopefully, and which is means that fewer violent messages, fewer rumors, and fewer digital spark that could ignite in real world conflict. And also, I want to flag here that good annotation isn't only about accuracy. It is also about fairness because that helps to ensure technology understands people across language, cultures, and communities and become a tool for protection rather than harm. Next one, Judith. Okay, so someone can ask, uh, can AI just do all of this automatically? And the answer is no, at least not yet, and not without us. So machines struggle with our our human language. So when you use sarcasm, irony, culture references, culture differences, and hidden bias, they can tell when a word that looks neutral actually carries a deep emotional or political weight. So that's why human annotation is critical. We give AI what's called, yeah, let's call it the result of our annotation or something. So we teach it how to tell the difference between harmful and peaceful language, and as I said, in peace building, that's a matter of life and death because the faster harmful content is detected, the sooner platform can act to protect communities. So annotation isn't just about data work, it's this work. It is how we create digital systems that recognize dignity uh, and empathy. Over to you.
So I'm going to explain the basically the annotation life cycle. And first, you have to begin with defining the problem. So, which is basically what question are we trying to answer with the model? And for example, what we were doing is trying to understand the polarization when it comes to social media. And why this matters for defining the problem is it prevents big labeling and wasted work, and it also helps align the annotators and the machine model goals with the machine model goals. And after having the your problem statement, you then have to collect the relevant data. For example, for us, we mostly did public online content with contextually diverse samples, so through dialect, tone, and different communities in Kenya. And after that, you'd have to create an annotation guideline, which is basically like a clear handbook for the annotators. So, definitions of each label, the decision criteria. It will be nice to have some edge examples and use cases to know when to mark certain data as uncertain, which would now help in resolving uncertainties in the QA part of the annotation. And after that, with the training the annotators, we'd go through a pilot phase, like an pilot annotation round, where here we start with small data to evaluate, to check if the guidelines make sense, if they're clear, to see if the annotators agree with the policies that we've put in for annotating. Is it confusing? And then also now to adjust based on the feedback. Then from there is when we'd start with a baseline model, which wouldn't have to be perfect, but be it just jumpstarts active learning to the model, and it also helps to prioritize the uncertain samples that would come up through the training. Then after that is now the active loop where we annotate and retrain and improve based on the results we get. That's it for the annotation lifecycle.
So we're now,
Okay.
yeah, I was just gonna set
Yeah.
you up, Husam, that
Mm,
we're now going to talk about two specific processes. So that's like generally what it is, why you need it, what a life cycle of annotation looks like. And this is now we're gonna make it really concrete with two examples. So maybe we start with Sudan, Husam.
yeah. Okay. Thank you, Wendy. So, in Sudan, um, as you know, there is a war since the 15th of April, 2023, and in fact, there is a war also on social media in Sudan. So there is lots of questions that can be asked, lots of posts that can be orientated, but we need to be specific. And that's why our central research question was how can digital hate speech in Sudan, particularly along ethnic, gender, political lines, be identified, classified, and analyzed to support an early warning machine for peace building efforts. So you just go to the next one. Um, so to answer that, we need to form a team first. So we form a team through an open call for activists and researchers interested in peace and data governance in Sudan. And we also reached out to previous collaborators and invited new voices, resulting in a diverse group of independent researchers, political activists, and the most important thing that this team doesn't represent the views of any party of the conflict, because our goal was very clear. We want to make sure that we are going to align with independence, neutrality, and analytic integrity, because you want to observe, document online hate speech without bias, and to build awareness that contributes to peace rather than being biased to any party. Can go next. So in in our ECFB project automatic classifier for this, we focused, as I said, on hate speech as a driver of violence in the Sudanese context. So we used a clear framework to classify uh, both and build a consistent, credible data set. So we say that we want to identify first what is hate speech. So we say hate speech is any direct or indirect expression that incites or threatens a group or individuals and leads to attacks on them or something. So and that based on race, ethnicity, or belief or religion, or gender, or sexual orientation, or disability, or social status, and so on. And then we created three main labels. We say this, we named it like this. This post is definitely hate speech when an attack or threat was so clear. And this could be or potentially a hate speech when context or tone was ambiguous. And this isn't a hate speech post or something, because when there was, and we say that when there was no targeting or incitement. So under this three main pillars, we use 10 subcategories. And by the way, we developed these subcategories by time. By the way, we started with four main subcategories, and then we developed six more. So now we have 10 subcategories. It includes gender hate, ethnic hate, religious hate, disability, political hate, social status, exclusion, contempt, dehumanization, or and call to violence, because when you call for violence, in fact, you are spreading hate for those who want to harm. And each one of these subcategories help us to see not just what's being said, but how they evolve from mockery to exclusion, and finally to insight. Can we go to the next one? Jenny? So I think this is the, the very important thing that I want to talk about is the lessons and challenges, um, and I want to elaborate more on each of them. So why we work in annotation in Sudan amid war, displacement, and all of these atrocities that's happening in Sudan, what we were doing wasn't easy, and we still didn't finish our work. We're still working, and so we're still learning, by the way. So, but I think there's seven main lessons that we have and challenges that we have faced, and we learn a lot from them. First, the first thing is context is everything. Was because words change meaning in crisis. A political term can suddenly become ethnic. Um, we faced that while we audited. There was lots of political words that shifted its meaning to become an ethnic words after the word. So we learned to read language through the lens of the moment. The next thing is uh, ambiguity thrives in division, because people in conflicts usually use coded or sarcastic language to spread hate without being obvious. That's why we relied on discussion, not guesswork. Um, the third thing, which is very important in Sudanese context right now, is military language complicates things, because we face lots of quotes. This is just about orders or insults that comes from officials in the army or in the RSF, so on. So all of these things blew together in wartime, wartime rhetoric, and we had to work down sentences carefully, because we need to ask. I think three main questions. The first thing is, uh, was it a command? What is a command? Uh, what was it a threat? Or was it just a noise? We have to ask these three questions to deal with the military language while this while conflicts in Sudan. The fourth thing is language usually evolve fast, because words like traitor, patriot shifted meaning week by week, and I won't say day by day in Sudan. So we start keeping alive glossary to keep up with that. The fifth thing is hate toward individuals often reflects group hate, because when someone attacks a person because of their tribe, because of their gender, because of their religion, because of their political opinion, it is still hate speech. The other thing is team dialogue beats solo judgment. I think our best practice and our best accuracy, our best results came from good reviews. Um, we were so lucky to have um, six researchers that were very hard to identify hate speech and we discussed that in weekly basis. And I think arguing, debating, and agreeing on things, that collaboration built trust and reduced bias with while we working. The final thing is annotation is never natural, because every label is an act of responsibility. If you get something wrong and you just go easy with it, that might silence victims or justify hate. And if we get something right, that can protect lives one day, maybe. Finally, I just wanted to say that, yeah, annotation um, remind me at least, that this doesn't only happen in negotiations. It starts in the word we choose, the meanings we clarify, and the data we decide to care about. That's why I think this process, this thing that we are doing is very important for Sudan and for Kenya, also and for all the places in the world. So thank you, and over to you.
Uh, okay, I think I'll go next. So in for Kenya, our research question was mostly based off of attitude polarization as part of the polarization footprint, which is characterized by the perceptual shifts toward the stereotypes, dehumanization, the individuation and vilification of the different types of identities we have in Kenya. So we analyzed the content on different social media posts, identified conflict related patterns, and applied contextual insights to identify the polarizing content. And if we go to the how we classified, okay. So we had two types of classification criteria, where those polarization, probably polarizing, and definitely polarizing. If you go to the next slide. So with potentially polarizing, it would be when mostly when an individual is the one that has, let's say, being insulted, but some data that is definitely polarizing would have to be when a whole group, whether it's an insult directly to a tribe, an insult directly to a gender, which later on my colleague Rachel will explain more on that. So if you go to the next slide. So we had the different flags that we used, as because again we're doing on attitudinal polarization. So if the negative stereotypes where a group of people have been generalized in the post, where vilification is if there was something derogatory said to a group of people or individuals, or dehumanization where the people are seen less than humans or equal to an animal. Uh, the next, yes. So continue the individuation where a language strips the person of their individuality, whether it's their personal identity or reduces them to just a group. And then now for mark for review would be where uh, the annotator wouldn't be sure of where to categorize the said data. Yes. Okay.
Um, Viola and Husam. So I'd like to speak on team composition when it comes to the Kenyan annotators. Our team was quite diverse, and this was very intentional. Within the team, we had guys with a media background, that is a practice in media practitioners. We had representation from the national regulators, that is within government. We had peace builders. These are people who've actively engaged in peace work within the country, and as well as researchers in general who've worked on conflict issues in the country as well. And what this helped us do, it just helped bring in the different perspectives around one theme, which is looking at peace on the social platforms. Yeah, so we were able to just bring in, you could hear how perhaps the regulators are able to look at a particular issue compared to how, let's say, a media person would look at it. So bringing all these diverse perspectives was just intentional to try and just enrich the process as a whole. Again, back to the composition, it was based on what guys are done on their backgrounds, just bringing in the local knowledge. Yeah, these are guys who've worked within the context, within various parts of the country, engaged with conflict communities and conflict issues, from policy to implementation of programs, and so on. And so having this knowledge with us within the team was just very crucial to us, just us bringing it what we know as was actually happening, instead of maybe trying and just creating a what if situation. So we were actually working with what we know happens within our space. And then when it came to just doing reviews, we had regular meetings at at various intervals, because the annotation was done in rounds. So after a few rounds, we sat down and were able to just review some of the results that had come from the annotated rounds, annotated texts. Yeah. So we were able to see where there were inconsistencies, where there were agreements, and so on, and just reflect on perhaps why would perhaps a certain annotator classify a certain test as so and so, and we're able to sit down, debate, and discuss. And at the end, of course, there would be disagreement, but we're also able to come to an agreement, and that would inform how the process will go in the next round. So this was very participatory from our end. When it comes to, we can move to some of the challenges we had from our team. Of course, fatigue. We had, yes, the annotation was done in several rounds, but we had rounds where there were huge sets of data, and this could perhaps bring fatigue based on the volume, yes, volume of the data you're looking at, but also on the content itself. Yeah, you find that you're looking at some content that is a bit heavy, a bit, yeah, and it could just weigh on you as an annotator. So part of our strategies was just trying to pace yourself as you're working through the content, as you're annotating. You could take breaks as you're doing this. Yeah, just try and pacing yourselves at intervals. If it's 30 minutes or so, you sit down, do this, and do it as you're doing other things, so that you don't overwhelm yourself with this content. What we also experienced was ambiguity, because again, ours was text annotation. So we were just looking at posts across social media, and some of these lacked context. So sometimes you would come across content that you were not able to sufficiently classify, because it needed more information for us to be able to mark it successfully, or yeah. And so we saw this, but we were able to, again, through our reviews and discussions, just put this aside for review, and just say that for us perhaps to mark this as polarizing content, we needed a bit more context based on what was the discussion around, because we were annotating based on what would you classify this at face value without thinking deep into it. Another challenge we faced was data bias. Again, we were looking at content across different platforms: Facebook, X, I think TikTok, and some from Instagram. And when you look at how the Kenyan community engages online, it's different across this platform. So when you're looking at, for example, content from Instagram, you would say that there's no polarizing content, yeah? So you'd say that the online space is safe, it's not in any way polarizing in any way. But when you go to another platform, for example, X, you'd find now there's this sort of variety. So having that diversification when it comes to data from the different platforms just was able to now counteract that the challenge of a data bias. Yeah. Lastly, looking at subjectivity, of course, in as much as we had the different expertise within the room, we had the definitions and the guidelines set out when it comes to how to annotate. Of course, based on your background or your culture and so on, this would influence how you annotate, or how you interpret or understand some of this content. And again, this came out in our discussions, and we were just able to now try and stand at a neutral place and just try and acknowledge your own personal biases that would perhaps influence how you annotate. So we were able to try and overcome this through some discussions, and just reviewing how some of the disagreements were coming, and refining the process as well. Yeah. Speaking to, okay, these are examples of some of the data that we came across. So when Viola was talking about classification, again, this was we before we even began annotating, the initial discussions we had were around just co-creating this definition and this classification. Yes, we had the overarching definition and guidelines, but we did also co-create some to just, again, refine the process. So you'd find content that has some of the aspects that Viola highlighted. You could clearly see that this content has an aspect of vilification, but then when you look at it, it does not perhaps mention a particular group or a particular person. So you could just say that perhaps it was just an expression of anger, but not necessarily polarizing content. So from these two examples, you can see the first one is classified as polarizing because it refers to a certain group, but also uses language that is insulting. So that's why it was labeled as definitely polarizing. But when you look at the second one again, that one again was looked at as something that was just an expression of anger from the user, so not polarizing in as much as the language used could be picked out as a vilification. Yeah, open to more questions on this, and Viola and I can address. I'd like to go to lessons, yes. Yeah, so some of the lessons we picked up along the process and even towards the end is that co-creation was really key. And given the different backgrounds and expertise we had, it just helped bring in, expand the understanding we had of what polarizing is in our context, yeah? So bringing in that contextual knowledge, enriching some of the definitions and just making it more relevant to our space. So this helped reduce perhaps some of the disagreements we had if someone is speaking from a media perspective or as a researcher and so on. So this doing these discussions and reviews and just co-creating some of these definitions was really great in terms of reducing disagreements. We also tried to, I've spoken to this, we were refining the process as we went. So from the initial rounds, we picked up where there were disagreements, and then this then informed how we were moving on when we came across such a type of a content. For example, we had two classifications. We had definitely polarizing and polarizing. So how would you differentiate that? So we were looking at if it's to a group, then it was definitely polarizing. But if it's to an individual, then you would just say that that one is just polarizing content. In terms of embedding diversity, again, looking back at our team composition just enriched the whole process and just allowing us to look at different perspectives beyond looking it from a single eye or a single point of view. And lastly, just bringing in operational flexibility. Just again, we had instances that we just had disagreements across some of the results we got that perhaps it was maybe 3-2, 3 saying polarizing and 2 saying not polarizing, just based on understanding and experiences and perspectives as well. So it's something that we accepted that we could allow, so long as this is of course after the discussion, so long as it was not but this was not a huge percentage of the annotated data. So we believe that from how we trained the model, it was sufficiently even with the disagreements that were there at the end. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it from me, Julie.
Okay, amazing. Thank you all. I think it's so useful if you're talking about annotation to have just concrete examples and what were the guidelines and what were the classification criteria. And yeah, thank you all so much. We now have time for questions, and we tried to leave a lot of space. And I see that people we have here, you might, are on these various projects, but haven't connected in the same space. People are doing other types of research or annotation. And so welcome any and all questions and discussion here. You can put it in the chat I can also bring you on if you would rather voice in your question. So if you want to put in the chat that you would like to, or if you raise your hand, I don't know if you could do that or not. If you put in the chat that you want to talk, I'll bring you in. But before we get started, or while people might be formulating their questions, I wonder if I could start, and maybe start with you, Hussam, on why and how you arrived at hate speech, because it wasn't the only option for what you might develop a classifier around. So why was that one chosen?
Um, I think this is a very important question because, in fact, as I told you, um, analysis eight, after the war erupted on the 15th of April 2023, I think there's lots of things that can be seen in social media soon. We can see the polarization, we can see hate, we can see the call of violence, we can see all of these things. But in fact, in particular, when we are speaking about Sudan, what the main driver for all of these things is hate in Sudan. So we had this discussion in our initial meetings, and we were just trying to discuss what do you think is the very main topic that we need to look into its details. We need to annotate its post and so on. So we're just trying to think about all of the all of the options that we have. And when we try to draw this map of what's happening in Sudan, we just discover that what links all of these things together is hate. So when we look into the hate speech in Sudan, we will see the calling for violence, we will see the polarization, we will see the exclusion, we will see lots of things that's happening through using the hate speech. So I think so. And by the way, right now people are being mobilized to go to use by using hate speech. So we need to look into that. That's why we decided to ask this question: how we can identify, classify, and analyze the hate speeches Sudan using this process that uh, we spoke about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Thank you. All right, we have a couple more questions in the chat. Let's start with Kate's. Um, Kate is, oh, I just got them down. Kate is commending kind of the team collaborative participatory aspect that both of these processes had. And how did you arrive at that? Has this come with prior experience of more siloed annotation? I have an opinion on this, but I'm wondering if any of you three have had different annotation experiences that were less collaborative. Yeah,
Uh,
go ahead. Yep.
yeah, I think it's a first for me. I think it's a first for the team that I'm working with. Um, and I think this is part of our journey in notation. We are learning together, we are experiencing this thing together. That's why we are always trying to debate, trying to argue, and trying to agree after this arguing, after this debating, and we usually do um 2 to 3 rounds on both that we have already annotated, so we can make sure that we are all at the same page. I think this is a very important thing. If you want to be an annotator, you don't have to have an experience in that. You can just go and experience the water yourself. I think, yeah, and this is how we are doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that you don't have to have expertise in annotation. It's that it's your social placement, it's your subject matter expertise. Yeah. Viola, did I see you come on mute?
Oh, my point was going to be the same for Husam, where it was also my first time being on the side of annotation, as most of the time I'm on the technical side. But he's right. You don't really need to be an experienced annotator. You can just start. So it depends on just being part of the community and the expertise topic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. My kind of take on this too is that my conception of annotation is that it's typically an outsourced process, that it's like it's a labor intensive data need. It's often like relegated to researchers or on sort of bigger models that are being built kind of outsourced to people. And so I think this is a different model in that if peace builders themselves are building a classifier for their own interests and purposes, then like them being involved in all the aspects of that process, including this what can be tedious annotation process, but that which, Hussam sort of said is neutral and, I can't remember if it was you, Rachel, or Viola brought in that, yeah, it's like it's deeply integrated into the work and what would come after it. So I think that is something unique to be like participating and involved in the full process rather than this like other task that you happens over there. Okay, bringing in another question from Daniel. You mentioned that the annotation process cannot be done by AI yet. Have you tried to use an LLM on the text that you manually annotated to quantify how good the AI actually agrees with the human assessment? I'm just going to start answering and then you guys jump in because there's also other expertise here. It's not that AI isn't involved at all, and I'll post in a link that kind of shares the model building process. But that it's an iterative kind of machine learning process in which an LLM is being tested against, or at least a more advanced classification model like BERT models are being used. But it often starts with kind of a zero shot to see what are the areas of uncertainty so that what is being annotated, the data that's being annotated is strategically chosen based on like some of those uncertainties that an LLM would have, for example. So it is at points in the process. I think Hossam's point, which Hossam, you please answer next, is that it still requires, it's not that it could do the whole thing. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about something, I think, because I see many questions around this about the irritation of not being natural. So I think when I say that irritation wasn't natural, I mean that the process itself, not just the outcome, um, is a form of disbelief. So first, let's talk about the people who are working on this. So our team comes from a very different background, political perspectives. So we were all personally affected by the conflict in some way. So when we sat together discussing and labeling posts, some of which were painful or harmful for us, and some of these posts are yeah, you feel personally attached to. It wasn't just a technical work. We have to understand it. It's not just a technical work. It was an exercise of dialogue and empathy. So we had to listen carefully to each other. We have to answer the question about our different assumption, and we have to find a common ground on how we understand language that collaboration across differences between us. And secondly, it is about the purpose. We know that annotation would train an AI system to detect, in our case, hate speech, okay, or in the case of Kenya, I think polarization portrayed. So this tool can help to prevent escalation and protect communities online. So we have to feel strong moral responsibility in this case. Every label had consequences. Get it right meant contributing to safety and understanding. Getting each form could reinforce base or injustice. So in this sense, annotation wasn't just natural. I mean, it's active. It's an active thing. It's active performance and so on. So it's something that combines human dialogue with technical perception and push back against digital violence and digital harms, and that's why I believe it's directly connected to peace building, both within our team and hopefully across the wider digital space. And that's why we have to keep eye. I think that was what John Maria asked about in the chat. That's why we have to keep eye on the words that be evolving in the in this context and so that I spoke about that we need to understand that language shifted quickly in this context. We have to understand that words change its meaning. I'm gonna give you an example, guys. So there is this word, the wonderful ones. Um, and I'm always using this example. So it's in Arabic, it means Allah, which means the wonderful ones. If you hear this word at any context, you would never imagine this is a hate word, because after this word, they decided that we are not going to use the word slave or abid in Arabic, because in fact, Meta can detect us, the community can attack us. So we are going to play this game. We are going to change the phrase. Rather than using slaves, we are going to use the word the wonderful ones. And then what's going to happen is this word is going to change into a different meaning immediately, because we need to look in it differently right now. So we can't just say that we are going to use this word on a daily basis and just ignore what's happening in reality. We have to be attached to this thing, and we have to understand that we shouldn't be biased to anything. We have to keep arguing, keep debating, keep agreeing on things to make this process ends with good outcome as
That's great. Any other insights, Rachel and Viola? Great. Oh, yeah, Rachel. Yeah.
I'd like to just maybe respond to two questions.
Yeah.
And the QA. I can see one was asked on how do you distinguish between potentially and maybe polarizing. So in our case, potentially was if that particular content targeted a specific group, if it was directed to a particular group, and this was explicitly outlined, then it was definitely potentially polarizing. Maybe it is when the content itself has the aspects that fall within our classification, that is, whether it is vilifying or has aspects of dehumanization and all that, but was not directed at any particular group or person. So we will classify it as maybe. So in our case, that's how we differentiated between the two. On the question on how to deal with the fact that online language keeps evolving, yes, this is a reality. When you look in our case, what is perhaps not polarizing now could be polarizing when we go into, say, an election period. So we were alive to this fact that the space keeps changing. When you look at previous elections, we've had the NCAC, that is the hate speech commission here in Kenya, are just looking at having a lexicon. So the lexicon contained words that for them they termed contained hate, if you use this word. So these are particularly relevant when you're looking at it during those very volatile periods, election and public protests and all that. So we were alive to this fact, and for this aspect, I believe now then the model would reflect that during that period. Yeah, so it is not a fixed situation that because at this point it may recognize one word as not polarizing, but next year it becomes polarizing, it will be able to update itself based on that. Yes. I hope I've answered you. Thank you.
That's great. And then we have 2 minutes left and 2 questions left. So, and both by Benjamin, how did I realize you were here? I should have just brought you on to answer some of these questions. But for anyone, how easy or hard was it to be neutral to the conflict, and how did you try to do this?
I think okay.
Okay, well,
Bioluminescence.
On the question on how uh, easy it was to be neutral, um, I'd say to be honest, there was some data that was hard, some context, especially if it touches for your identity group. For example, for me, if there were posts being that one could argue is degrading towards women, but at the end of the day, we'd have to. What made it a bit easier, or was the point of neutrality, was the annotation guidelines that we were given. So I'd say that it was a bit difficult, but at the end of the day, we used the guidelines to settle certain disagreements.
So Sam, I wonder if you could, sorry, I didn't mean to turn off this. Yes, but I wonder
yeah,
if you could do the
yeah,
next, so the other
uh,
one. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
okay, so I just want to say something very quickly. It's too hard to do that, by the way, especially every member of the team experience personal losses, I think, on daily basis. But I think, however, discussion and debate help individual to regain unbiased thinking because I think it's part of the nature of those who we chose to go to be part of this group. They have it's a group of critical minds and free unbiased ideas not aligned with the warring party. So I think it's too hard. But what we are doing is trying to give a very sufficient amount of time to discussion and to look into post multiple times to ensure that we all view both as a text be attached from our personal feeling about it. So I think, yeah, I've answered the first question. The second one, is it about not being natural? I think I have answered that.
I think it's
Or is it,
specifically about like what impact, like why, how did you consider annotation to be a form of peace building? Is it that, it's this like discursive, you're talking with diverse opinions, or is it more that like the output, you're hoping the output then has a real impact?
I'm talking about the output. I'm hoping, as I said, um, yeah, not have a very um, big impact in what's happening in Sudan or elsewhere. Because in fact, what we are trying to do, we are trying to train an AI system to detect um, hate speech in a context that keep evolving and changing in daily basis, which is not easy. But I think it's a very important thing to be done because in fact nowadays lots of people are being killed because these atrocities have been justified online and no one looked into it and no one had the chance to just ask an unbiased machine uh, about these posts. I think if we have that, we can just create a warning system, a warning machine that can detect and yeah yeah, point a finger to the harmful content in social media. And maybe one day we can just um, provide protection for communities through this machine, through giving the tool for everyone to identify and to know what's the hate speech, how it works, and how it can be detected to this machine. Yeah. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really great. And I think both the question and the response, and particularly about the really hard situation of Sudan, is more important than a few minutes. So, but thank you for anyone who were able to stay for those last few minutes, and thank you to these awesome annotator panelists. As the annotation was really collaborative and participatory, so was the development of this webinar. And so we'll be sharing more about outputs, like both of the models that are being built here will be open source and available to be used on Phoenix. But then we'll also be doing some written outputs and other things to share about the experiences. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to you all for presenting and making this happen. Bye, everyone.